Welcome to the Nejah Chuan podcast. My name is Isaac Kamens. This is a bi-weekly podcast where my friend Jess O'Brien and I discuss internal martial arts, Qigong, and meditation. This is our 100th regular episode. So Jess is here with me to do the intro. Hey, Jess, how's it going?
Here I am.
All
Good
right.
to good to be making it to this momentous occasion. We 100 episodes in. It's pretty hard to envision when we first started. I remember episode one was the we did on the cover of Power of Internal. I mean, of Opening the Energy Gates.
Well, it's almost exactly 3 years. I think
Wow.
within a week or so
Yeah.
of when we first published the first episode. So I thought for this, we'd just give a little, what it was like for us, what the experience has been like over the last couple of years and what we've
Yeah.
learned going through Baiwa's book and all that.
Definitely. I mean, I guess the first thing I'd say is that it's been a learning experience. I felt like we got a pretty good handle on Kumar's system of Qigong and martial arts. And then we sort of took that lens and applied it to during this third season to Baihua's book and just going really as deep as we can with the knowledge we have through what Baihua was trying to open up. And, along the way, it seems like he sent us in a bunch of different directions trying to figure out what he was talking about and sort of leads to follow and little just tidbits and concepts that's like we have our understanding of it that you and I sort of come upon, but then we've gone into other sources to kind of get third or fourth, statements to try and help triangulate what the teachings are. And like all this stuff, nothing's set in stone. Like each different school, they all use the same terminology, but they sometimes talk about different things. So for us, we're able to it helped me get a little deeper sense of what we've been training all these years and how other people see it and sort of directions to take my training going forward in the future and our training together.
Yeah, I liked the juxtaposition of doing the energy gates first because that was kind of the soft stuff and, the, if you will, the water approach to doing Liu Hongji's Neigong, and then moving through it and getting, the primary sources and all that and all the teachers and everything, and then moving into Baiwa's book, getting into the other side of Liu Hongji's teachings and Baiwa's take on how it all goes together. And I think it provides a little bit more complete picture of like, the whole system rather than just, Bruce's version of what it is.
And the second season was fun to take a deep dive into like looking at the teachers that really were part of that big movement in the 1910s, 20s, 30s that really created the internal martial arts that we know today, from Sun Ludong's writings of sort of joining the three martial arts together and including these ideas of Taoism, and then the various ways schools were associating Jingwu and the nationalist government was promoting it. It's like the world we do of internal martial arts today came to life during that time fed by the sources of the past. So you can say they are ancient arts, but they really took the form that we know today during that formative period, that critical,
Right, that late
I don't know what
1920s or whatever it
yeah,
was,
just that early part of the 20th century, basically, where the terms and the forms that we do now kind of coagulated and came together then, basically, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, and I mean, for me personally, one of the things that's been interesting is finding these like repetitive threads in all the different books that come up like in different ways, but it's the same mechanics. So, like for
Hmm.
example, the rise, drill, overturn, and fall that Sun Ludong talks about is the same mechanical thing as the microcosmic orbit, right? So it's like
Hmm.
you're getting into this um idea of like how to use these quote unquote ancient Taoist principles in these modern texts, and like Baiwa's
Right.
whole thing of trying to take it into the quote unquote modern age with his comparisons, which don't always work. I
I
don't.
mean, like you're saying about comparisons, there's layers, right? So like you can talk. Sun Ludong was speaking on multiple layers at once of both the physical and then that internal energy circulation. And they're, those layers are inherent in internal martial arts, which is part of what makes them cool. Like you can practice it on any of those layers. You don't have to include the other layers if you don't want, and your teacher may or may not, but it's just we looked at the different books from different people and you can see they're using the same structures. And then we get to Baihua where he's using that same, like say Jing Qi Shen, that triple layer of the process you go through to develop your energy in Neigong. Internal martial arts is using some of those same metaphors. So by looking at the different books and the different masters, we looked at, Master Shang from Xingyi, we looked at Master Chang from Bagua, and we just went through all the different lineage members who contributed to Liu Hongji's education so that then we got to the material that we knew and we could compare what these older books were trying to pass down and the bits and pieces that made it into our education. We found the sources for those, which is really interesting. And like you're saying, each of those sources has layers to it and depth to it and just directions you can take it while still remaining true to the structure of the systems themselves. And if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I mean, and like one of the things with talking to like Alan and Mike McConnell and Lee and all, all those guys in the interviews was that one of the things for me is hearing, different people's versions of it, right? Like, or how they've experienced it, because it's one thing to just talk about these things in, vague terms. It's another thing to have done it for, 20, 30 years and be able to talk about how it's actually, changed your practice and your awareness and all that, and
Yeah.
I can speak to my own experience, but like, hearing it from someone else and getting a roughly the same, kind of gist of, okay, well, at least we're all on kind of on the same page, points to that even when, the teaching is a little different and you all kind of take different branches of these things, when you really get down to what, quote unquote, what it's really about, most people kind of seem to agree it's about trying to find this um connected thing inside of yourself that's, your true essence, if you will, and all this stuff, and sort of the letting go in the process of how part of how you find that essence, find that the Jing and the Qi and the Shen, is by letting go of all these assumptions and and just kind of doing the practice without an agenda. I think has been one of the things for
Yeah,
me.
definitely agree. Seeing it from multiple perspectives always helps me clarify the direction I'm on. And it doesn't mean everyone has to agree with you. It's just that they may be different, but they're also following a similar process. So like we may have different, the flavors of what we do, but they're also following a path that has structure on it. And those steps may be placed in different spots, but we're all sort of on the same general journey through from Master Sun Ludong's time till now. All the things he brought up in his book, we bring up today. I mean, he goes as far as what should you do if someone has a gun, and he's pretty
Right.
much, like everything from that to how do you, what are these mystical concepts as well. And so then you fast forward to now, those are the same discussions going on now. Is it going to work in the octagon, or can you use this to meditate and become enlightened? Those same questions remain as hotly debated as ever, which is hilarious and probably inevitable knowing humankind. And that just goes to show this shit's killer, man. People love it. What can you do?
There's always the argument about, oh, which martial art is best, and the opinion on that seems to change every 10 or 15 years, and um it just, it's like whatever, it's like fads, people just kind of go through different fads. And I think something that I think it was Mike McConnell said about, whatever you're gonna do, there's gonna be people who will say it's not the right way or the right thing to do and all of that. And the hardest part about committing to one of these practices is just kind of not ignoring, but taking in the criticisms of the art, but without it affecting your faith in what you're doing, right? That
Yeah.
you have to believe that what you're doing is worth your time,
Yeah.
and that that you're going to put your full effort into it, because if you have that doubt of like, why am I doing, then it's not really going to work
Right.
well. And I think
Right.
the over and over we keep hearing this thing about it's your intent, your that has to be the thing that powers this whole practice. And I think that's the cool part, is kind of uncovering different aspects of that and how people have different experiences of that. And I think,
Yeah. I mean,
going
this stuff can
forward.
be frustrating because, like, I feel like I heard a lot of these concepts from day one. I got introduced to softness and using the mind and so on. And yet here I am 30, 40 years later, still trying to investigate that further, taking it further. And same with the physical training. At first, it was so clumsy, and now I'm still finding myself off balance at times or whatever. Like, and yet at the same time, I can see when I teach, when a beginner comes to me and wants to try some stuff, I'm like, man, I don't, sometimes I'm just like, wow, I have changed a lot since I first started. Cause I was just like this guy at one time, and now I can kind of do this more smoothly. So like it fulfills the promise, but at the same time, each promise that's fulfilled adds another distant mountaintop that now you have to go conquer that one. So it gets, you could either see it as frustrating or endlessly enriching
Well,
because
yeah, I mean,
it goes on forever.
it's plateaus, right? You reach the top of one and you think, wow, I've reached the top of the mountain, and then you
Right.
look over and there's like another peak, and you're just like, oh,
Totally.
oh,
And
here we go.
Baihua's book has definitely helped me see what I've been training from a different perspective without the same sort of like Kumar has this whole language around how he teaches what he teaches. And so you can see his classmate has a way of teaching very similar stuff, but he uses different metaphors, drawing from different books. I mean, they're both constantly quoting Lao Tzu and stuff, but you can see Master Leo himself is a different thing, right? They're each interpreting his teachings,
Yeah, I
but
was
his
gonna
teachings are a bigger basket, right? It's a bigger fruit that we're drawing from all these teachings out
I was
of.
gonna say, like, it's like they're both paraphrasing the same stuff,
Right.
and they do it
They're,
in their own
yeah.
way. And so Bruce
Hmm.
does it in a more, I think, casual but more detailed way, and Baiwa does it in a more esoteric and
More
formal,
formal.
right?
Yeah.
And so you get that kind of the again, the difference being most likely that there was a bit of a language barrier with Bruce that there wasn't with Baiwa. So
Mm.
Leo had to simplify things for, quote unquote, the Western mind.
Yeah.
That's where, for us, I think for learning it, it was really, I don't think I could have learned it with the more traditional
Right. No way.
language, right? I
I don't
needed
know the five classics, or
exactly,
whatever, like
right.
all that
I
stuff
was,
that
yeah,
Baiwa was doing as a youth.
yeah. And so I
That
think that's where, now, after all these years of practicing the water side of it, being able to kind of connect the dots with the fire stuff from Biowatts,
hmm.
it's been really interesting.
Yeah.
So
And I
she,
think on the Patreon, I've been able to really enjoy going deep into the Negong and the more difficult parts of his book, which can be incredibly abstruse and challenging, has really pushed my brain to the limit in between, say, the large space and the small space that he keeps talking about, and the relationships that he's of heaven and earth and man and earth, and like all these, like you were saying, the
mm,
layers and the connections that he keeps drawing over and over. But I do feel like he repeats himself enough to where it's like some of the stuff he was teaching sort of beats itself into your head by constantly over explaining things over and
yeah,
over. It finally starts to sink in
no, yeah. I
eventually,
mean,
I guess. And in a way, we've tried to do a similar thing with our podcast. Is like, the way I see our podcast is that we've had a lot of fun with it, was our number one thing. We want to just tell good stories and tell and talk about things that interest us, that we think other people like us will be interested in. but it's been nice to have like this podcast and Patreon, yin and yang, because our podcast, we can talk about what goes on in the various books we've been tapping into and the stories of the masters. But in the Patreon, we've been able to go deep into the BK Francis system from our perspective and really go into detail through all like the 8 energy bodies, to go through how to do the things in heaven and earth and gods in the clouds and so on, from and practice tips and like and how we see the system and how it works, like to get very specific about his school, so the people in his school can do the Patreon train, listen to the Patreon stuff with us. That'll really help them understand, I think, how the system is taught and how to best go about it, and what the various pieces, and sort of see that big picture that we've been developing over a long time. Whereas our main podcast is anybody from any school could hopefully get a kick out of it and hear some good adventure stories and some interesting odd concepts that we're running across in the books. And I think that's what enables us as internal martial arts as a big family to connect. But as far as our specific family that you and I are part of, that we've been training in all these years, through the Patreon, we were talking about stuff that we wouldn't really say in public, right? We wouldn't just like get on the TV and start blabbing about this
Yeah.
stuff. Like, we created that specifically for the people who are in the school like us, who want to know the inner workings and the inner details and the inner history and how these pieces all kind of came together. Most people in other schools wouldn't care so much, right?
Probably
They don't
not.
care about our teacher.
Yeah.
But if you're into the energy art stuff, then the Patreon is where you're gonna get a lot more of our experience. And we've been able to connect with a bunch of mentors and older teachers than us in the school over the years, who we brought on and sort of helped give their perspective too. So I don't know. I felt like there was no guide for me until I met you about how to go about training in this school. And then, so if we're offering this, gives people who aren't around a chance to, like, I don't know, just get that depth that was passed on to us. That people would say, well, by the way, did you know this set comes from here? Or when we first learned it, it was like this. Or when
Yeah.
and he added this, so those bits and pieces that help you understand how this whole thing came together and kind of where it's going.
Yeah. I mean, well, I know Bruce tends to, he gives the highlights when he tells the story, right? So, for example, he mentioned, if he's listing the lineage, he'll just mention the top guys on the lineage, right? He's
Right.
not going to go through every single person and tell you the whole story of all the whole thing. And so I think there's a tendency to, because it wasn't that important to him when he was learning,
Yeah.
for people to kind of dismiss that as being not that important. And I've always felt that, if you're going to be part of a school, knowing the lineage and the history of your school is not going to help you. It's not going to make you better at doing it, but it's inspiring, and it gives you a sense of being part of something that's older than you are, right? And
Yeah.
there's a connection to the past, if you will, and all this stuff. But the bigger thing being that we're providing a little bit of the context for a lot of the stuff. Like, so Bruce will say, "Oh, Liu Hongjie studied with Magui," which is true, but he also studied with a bunch of other people that Bruce doesn't mention, for whatever reason. And so I think
Right.
it's important when you talk about, or even just take something like energy gates. I mean, a lot of people get the impression that energy gates comes from Liu Hongjie
Mhm.
because of the way Bruce talks about it. And the nuance there is that what he's saying is that some of the internal aspects of it and the approach that he's taking comes from Liu Hongjie, but he had that set and was teaching that set long before he met Liu Hongjie. And
Right.
so, things like that, it's not, again, it doesn't make that much of a difference in terms of your practice. I don't think, knowing your teacher's name makes a difference, but um if you're going to try to preserve these arts, which is really the goal of our whole podcast and really my whole life, uh is that part of preserving the art is preserving names of the people that were involved in it, and the best you can, the narrative of how it came to be, rather than just kind of
Yeah.
saying, well, it came from somewhere, and or just attributing it all to the last guy, and ignoring that there were many people who came before that.
Right.
So
So we're going to tell that deeper story and we're going to keep telling it. And I
uh,
think we may broaden our horizons a little bit, I
yes, I
think, going
think that
forward.
the plan for going forward is to expand the lens a little bit, and to broaden our scope to look at you know more people outside of our own lineage, and deeper into our own lineage, and try to give a sense of the Neja Chuan as a whole, and not just our own little version of it. So start looking at um, other sources, and just taking little articles and pieces from books, and Jess has a whole library of crazy books, so we're going to start pulling from some
Right.
of those. And um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, the if you want to put it real simply, the idea is save people the hassle of trying to track down all the books that have
Right.
one line about a guy or something like that, and to put it in a
Right.
place where, if you want to know what the connections are between these things and what we do, it's pretty straightforward, and hopefully it's pretty straightforward,
Right.
and there isn't as much digging that people have to do. So
Yeah. I mean, that way we can just, we've done the work of digging up these historical bits and pieces and these different books and articles and so on. And so that way we'll just throw them out there and get
I
them
mean,
out into audio form, you know?
one of the funnier things for me with doing this podcast has been, when I first started, we first started doing this and doing the research, and I'm looking up these names of all these guys that are on our list of people that we're going to talk about, and a lot of them, nothing, nothing would come up. And I search for it in English, nothing. Search for it in Chinese, you might get one or two pages, and it's usually a couple of translations from the same book, so you're just looking at the same thing over and over. But now when I search a lot of those names, the first thing that pops up is our podcast. So at least there's something out there where if you Google Liang Wen or one of these guys,
Right.
something comes up. It's not just
Right.
a complete void. So I feel like we're at least providing some service on that level.
Yep. Little
Yeah,
traces of breadcrumbs that lead
yeah.
back to the
For
history of this stuff. And
for future martial arts weirdos to
yeah.
follow.
And I hope we keep stumbling across interesting things because
Yeah,
there's a
me
lot
too.
more to discover out there. So we'll keep digging and see what we come up with.
All right, talk to you
All right,
soon.
bro.
Cheers.
Bye. In today's episode of the Neja Chuan podcast, we're going to continue our look at the martial art of Tai Chi. This season, we've been exploring the different masters of Tai Chi Chuan, and we've been sort of centering it on the different teachers of Bai Hua. He learned the Wu style from Liu Hongjie, and he also learned Yang style from a couple different directions, including one lesser known teacher of the old Yang style known as Lin Du Ying. And Isaac, what does Bai Hua say about Lin Du Ying in the book here?
Not much.
Oh, yeah.
Byron doesn't say much about him, but he says during middle school he moved to Jiamen and began training with martial arts master Lin Du Ying, originally from Fuzhou. And then he lists a whole bunch of martial arts that he did with Lin Du Ying, including Six Harmony Fist, Shaolin, Tiger, Crane, Leopard, Ape, and Snake, Five Shaped Fist, Monkey Fist, Drunken Fist, Long Fist, Wusong Breaks Manacles, and then finally we get to Yang Style Tai Chi. So it sounds like, I mean, he spent from about 12 to, let's see, 12 that would have been the mid 60s. So about 10 years with Lin Du Ying.
That's after he learned from Liu Hongjie as a child.
Yes. So
Interesting.
after he learns from Liu Hongjie, he
Up
goes,
in Beijing.
yeah, and it sounds like he was going back and forth
Yeah, because
a
later in
little
life
bit.
he ends up back in Beijing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a picture with him and Liu Hongjie in 77 or something like that. So he still was going back and forth, but he was at least initially living in Jiamin. So what he yeah, that's all he really says about Lin
Lin
Ying.
Du Ying, yeah, but he's clearly a high level Tai Chi practitioner, but he also knows all these other martial arts.
And he does have a picture of Lin in the beginning of the book, and it's the only
Mhm.
picture I've ever seen of the guy. He's not doing anything,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. He's a younger man in that picture. And so the only other thing we really have on Lin Du Ying is from the book by B.K. Francis, Power of Internal Martial Arts and Chi. He has an editor's note here in the back where he talks about his description of his experience with Lin Du Ying because Baiwa sent him a letter of recommendation or some kind of pass to go visit and train with Master Lin. So here's what is in the book here. The author studied the old Yang style with Lin Du Ying at the end of Ying's life in Xiamen, Fujian province, mainland China in 1983. Lin had originally learned this art in Beijing and Shanghai. His teachers were Tian Zhaolin and Wu Huichuan, two of the top Tai Chi fighters in North China and students of Yang Ban Ho.
Okay, now I have to jump in here and correct that because they were not students of Ban Ho. Tanjo Lin was 1 year old when Ban Ho died. So he actually was a student of Jian Ho, Ban Ho's younger brother, and Wu Haichuan was a student of Yang Chengfu's. So Bruce had a
So,
little bit off on that one.
right. But we don't really have any other information about this guy, Lin Du Ying, in southern China, who's a prominent Yang style practitioner. Um, and so all we can rely on are stories about his teachers, basically, that are more well documented. I do have one note out of one of my old notebooks that I found that says from one of Kumar's seminars where he said, well, here he says it again. Lin Du Ying learned from Yan Ban Ho. Well, that's clearly impossible.
Right.
So what he says in this notebook here is that I recorded this at some seminar he must have given. He says Lin Du Ying was high up in the gang scene of the Shanghai underworld, so he could pay Yang a lot as well as providing useful connections. So clearly, Lin Du Ying had underworld connections and political connections and financial connections that made him able to train with this higher echelon of guys, right? The Yang Xiaoho and the Yang Cheng Fu and the Tian Zhao Lin.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the difference between being a gangster and a official is just whose side you're on, I think.
Right. And at that time, sides were switching rapidly.
Yeah.
So, anyways, that's what little we know about this guy, Lin Du Ying. So let's start off looking at this guy, Tian Zhao Lin, teacher of Lin Du Ying. So his birth and death dates in this article by Leroy Clark, Tian Zhao Lin, A Legacy of Young Taiji. He says he's born in 1891, so 10 years before the Boxer Rebellion, and then he dies in 1960. So it says here that Tian Zhao Lin's father passed away when he was an infant. As a young boy of 8 years, he had to sell fruit to support his mother and two sisters. At that time, Yang Jianho, the second son of Yang style founder Yang Luchan, noticed him on his walks to the palace where he taught. He recruited him as his student and also provided maintenance for young Tian Zhaolin's impoverished family. Thus, from the age of 13 years on, Tian Zhaolin learned Taiji from Yang Jianho and subsequently from Jianho's sons Yang Xiaoho and Yang Chengfu. These teachers were exceptional and profound Taiji grand masters. So there you have it. He was a fruit seller on the way in front of the palace, sort of like when Dong Haichuan punched out Yin Fu in front of the
Right.
palace, who was a pretzel seller, or so it's kind of like being around the palace. You run into people like this on their way to work, basically. All right, so more about Tian Zhaolin. Once in the Yang family household, Tian Zhaolin was required to participate literally around the clock in the practice of their internal arts, alongside Yang Jianho's sons, Xiaoho and Cheng Fu. These practices were overseen by Father Jianho. Tian Zhaolin lived with the Yang family, practiced day and night with them, ate with them, and slept with them. The first 6 months, Tian Zhaolin was made to practice stake standing exercises exclusively. So standing training. After that, Jianho began to teach him the soft, sticky energy that he had inherited from his father, Yang Luchan. During the standing stake practice, should one of them move even the slightest, old Jianho would quickly come over to strike that person sharply with his long-handled smoking pipe. Similarly, during the practice of Jin, should one of them hesitate or stop, teacher Jianho would quickly approach and strike that person sharply with his pipe. Tian Zhaolin also became a constant companion of young Xiaoho. Tian also served as the practice partner for Xiaoho. He learned to withstand his various jins and blows. Because young Xiaoho is, like his uncle, famous for being harsh and cruel teacher. And poor Yang Jianho is like adopted by their family as his servant, basically getting his ass kicked.
Using him as like the punching bag, basically.
Yeah. And then the father's always lurking around, just slapping you if you slow down or stop ever. Literally around the clock practice. I love it. So yeah, that's legit, man. That's the old school.
For sure.
All right, this is good. During the early years, in addition to living, learning, and practicing at the Yang family home, Tian Zhaolin also fathered teacher Jianho to the palace and other various teaching sites carrying the master's sword. Since Tian Zhaolin had a very solid foundation and very high awareness level, he made great progress. After some 7 years of learning and practicing, in 1911, teacher Jianho ordered Zhaolin to enter a public fight contest representing his family. So he goes to fight in the public contest. Tian Zhaolin was surprised and quickly tried to beg off, explaining to his teacher that he did not feel adequately prepared and did not wish to bring dishonor on the Yang family. Jianho responded by telling him that he would not have ordered him to enter such a contest if he did not believe he was well prepared. Tian Zhaolin then followed his teacher's advice, entered the contest, and he won. Once home after the contest, Yang Jianho ordered Tian Zhaolin to follow his eldest son Xiaoho from that point forward. Xiaoho and Zhaolin were often seen together around the capital in Beijing and at martial arts exhibitions. Tian Zhaolin's reputation began to grow after his success in that raw fight competition. Dang, so he's earning his stripes at a young age. And the grandmaster at that point says, okay, now you're my son's student from here forward. Like, he sort of like gives him his black belt, kind of like, now it's time for you to like go from here. So yeah, it's cool. Like, he orders him to become his son's disciple and like almost to help his son too, though. And like, look, I'm going to give you this bro to roll with you, who's a badass, who's going to fight with you and sort of protect your, be your top student so he can take the challengers basically going forward. So after young Jianho passes away in 1917, Tian Zhaolin continued to learn from the son, young Xiaoho. So here it says that Xiaoho was known to possess a skill and method called 1,000 hands guan yin. Tian also learned the same method. In 1921, Tian Zhaolin followed his teacher to Hangzhou. There he hired a man-pulled chariot. The chariot man, upon hearing the northern accent, tried to double charge his fee. Tian Zhaolin refused to pay the unfair, outrageous price. Soon some 10 additional chariot men appeared and started to attack Tian Zhaolin. He launched them all out and onto the ground. And that's when you get in a fight with the taxi drivers and all the other taxi pedicab dudes just pull up and start wailing on you. But he knocked them all over. And then another time, Tian Zhaolin was drinking tea in a tea house by the lake. 2 army officers came in and told him to give up his seat. Tian refused. They struck at him, but both were launched away. The army officers then ordered 10 nearby soldiers to fight him. Again, Tian launched them all away effortlessly, one by one. So this next piece says, earlier generation Taiji people had an expression, hit the cow on the other side of the mountain. This phrase refers to hitting an opponent's front side with the pain and effect being felt on the back side. In years past, people who sparred with Yang Xiaoho often described him as having energy like electricity. That is, it caused very painful sensations in the muscles and even on the skin surface. Tian Zhaolin came from that background and also knew that method. In the 1940s, a guy known as Big Spear Liu came to Shanghai's Big World, the city's major performance and entertainment center. Big Spear Liu asked the doorkeeper, are there any good hands around here? In other words, he was seeking someone considered highly skilled in martial art in order to make a challenge. The doorkeeper told him of Tian Zhaolin. With that, Big Spear Liu set off to find him. He found Tian Zhaolin and immediately demanded to spar by each striking each other 3 times. Tian responded that it may not be necessary. He said, just let me touch you. If you can tolerate my touch, you win. Big Spear Liu, sensing a fool in an effortless victory, immediately agreed. The 2 men approached, and Tian Zhaolin reached out his hand to touch Liu's chest. Within a few moments, Big Spear Liu's facial muscles started to contort. Soon he grimaced. His face showed signs of intense pain. Big Spear Liu pulled away, and after recovering, commented, I have traveled throughout 5 provinces and various cities, but until today, I have never seen such a profound skill. So that's the electricity on touch. I can't say I've ever experienced that exactly, but I've felt some weird sort of energy from people, but not enough to, combatively shock me. I'm sorry to say.
Well, I mean, it's this is those legends of like, oh, you touched the guy and it feels, like fill in the blank. That's always because how else are you gonna really describe it? It's like,
Well, hit the cow on the other side of the mountain. So you touch him in the front, and then it's sort of
well, that's that
the effect shoots through.
yeah, that's that penetrating effect where you get hit in the front, and then there's
I mean, I associate that with Xing Yi, where I punch the front of your body and then you go flying backwards as I take my half step and step through you and sort of flings you away. But
yeah,
this
but
is even more like
it's
the
in Tai
subtle
Chi
it looks like.
too. I mean, it's in Tai Chi too. It's
Step
that's
up, parry, and punch. You could be
yeah, it would be the same. But it's like
punching through them.
yeah, you could do the same thing with any technique. Just any, forward motion can do that.
But this is more subtle. This is some kind of just light touch could zap somebody.
Well, again, it's refinement, right? Like, so he's saying this guy was of the level that, he just had to touch your skin to fuck you up, and didn't have to go, in that
That's
deep.
high level.
I mean, what Bruce said was all of his main teachers could hurt you with a tap, that
Pretty much. That
um
sounds about right.
he said, but that Leo could also heal you with that same tap. That was the unique thing that he had was to use
The highest level, yeah.
that same kind of fudging or whatever to make you feel good. And I've had that experience where your back is feeling kind of funky when you get to class and you get slammed up against the wall, and all of a sudden you're like, I feel a little bit better. I don't know how much of that is just, things getting knocked around, but there is a piece of it when you get that thing, that, like you said, that bone turn to the belly or something, and your whole body just kind of crumples around that fist.
Yeah.
Either you're going to relax and go with it and let your body kind of, reset, or you're gonna get like really hurt. So yeah, I don't know, it's just kind of that penetrating power of Tai Chi, right, where you hit the front and the damage is in the middle or in the back, right?
Yeah, that's the high, it's kind of the highest level type of thing or whatever. It's very subtle power. So returning to the Taiji classics, written commentary by Bai Hua, the grand student of Tian Zhaolin, whose bio we just looked into. So the next phrase from the 13, we're calling it the Song of the 13 Postures. Analyze the mind carefully. Every movement of the 13 postures is controlled by the mind. It does not take excessive effort to acquire this kind of ability. So that's from the classics. So Baihua goes on to sort of break that down. He says, Kui means to consider. Every movement of the 13 postures is controlled by the mind, means that all movements are required to have continuous internal connection, to open and close, to achieve motion and stillness, yin and yang, voidness and solidness, etc. All are unified by mind. E, that is essence, chi, and spirit.
So essence, chi, and spirit are unified by the mind.
So Jing, Qi, Shen is
controlled by your intent.
Yeah, your intent is kind of the driver there, or the unifier of those things. As you develop them, your intention is required to
So
make
all
it
of
happen,
these, all of these things are required for you to have this, to be doing Tai Chi essentially. And all of that is controlled by your mind.
So the mind, so I'm getting the impression he's kind of saying like, you go through the process of Jing Qi Shen using your mind, and that is how you forge a continuous internal connection. Now you can open and close, achieve motion and stillness. You can have all the different range of void to solidness, but you kind of need to have unified the
all
Jing
of
Qi
those
Shen
things
as the process.
All of those things are requirements after. So you've it says every movement of the 13 postures of Tai Chi is controlled by the mind, right? And is required to have the following things: continuous internal connection, opening and closing, uh, motion,
Motion and stillness.
stillness, yin and yang, void and solid, and then et cetera, right? All the other things that he's talked about. And then all of that is unified by your mind. It's not that it's really controlled by it, but your mind is what uh, keeps them all in time. Harmonizes, maybe is a good word, right? It like, because you're trying to match all these different things, right? Your mind, your breath, your body, your chi, and that something has to kind of keep the rhythm of all that, and that's your mind, that's your intent, right? Um, and that's the essence of the whole thing. The Jing Qi Shen is that you've integrated all these openings and closings and all this other stuff, and that's kind of your that's your Neigong. You've got all the stuff moving, everything's linked together. It's all one part moves, all parts move, one part stops, all parts stops. From posture to posture, the internal energy is unbroken, all that. And now it's like you got the formula, right? And now you can kind of go and work on the deeper meanings of the whole thing.
So his next thing he says, therefore, the formula of Tai Chi Chuan is the unified control of the waist, which conforms to the principle that less is more. That is, the truth is easier to grasp and apply by turning the complex into the simple.
Right. So this is where, to borrow Bruce's phrase, everything in Tai Chi comes from the waist. Right? The idea that the everything in the everything that comes from Tai Chi is all of those conditions.
Those things he just listed, yeah.
That he just listed all have to be controlled, or whatever word you want to use, by your dantian. That when you move your arm, it's not just your arm moving, it's something in your dantian, going through your body and opening all your joints and all this. So
and that's kind of what he says by turn the complex into the simple. So there's all this whole list of stuff, but by moving from the dantian and letting the waist dominate the action, that helps just make everything happen, basically.
You link everything to the dantian, right? Which is the whole thing he's been talking about with, make everything the one, right? The dantian,
the whole Gui Yuan Ne Gong process.
Right, is to connect everything into one, the dantian, right? The idea being that if everything's connected to your dantian, right? If you have this like hub where all the nerve, think of like power lines, right? All the power lines connect to this one hub. If you can just control that hub, it will then move everything else, right? So the shorthand is you don't have to be thinking about your hand, your foot, your head, all these different parts. If you can let everything just relax and sink into your dantian, all those things kind of happen together, right? And this is the paradoxical nature of Tai Chi. Is you've got a million things you got to do, but really you only got one thing you got to do, which is feel your dantian.
So right? You make the complex simple in that regard.
Right. And then, I mean, it's still hard to do.
Right. Well, that's the next thing he says.
Yeah.
The phrase, it does not take excessive effort, does not mean that it's easy to achieve. It's just that there is relatively no time wasted rejecting that which is near at hand and seeking that which is far away. We must clearly realize that in order to change the old habits of the body, for the body to adapt to the changes, it takes time and practice. This time is indispensable. So yeah, it's interesting because it says this kind of, it does not take excessive effort, but like what it takes is steady, slow, intentional effort.
Yeah, he's like, you can't force it, right?
Right. Changing habits, you can't force to happen. It has to be done slowly over time.
Yeah, pushing yourself to do it a lot in a short period at a time isn't going to do anything for you.
So Baihua ends with his explanation of this piece by saying, we must clearly realize that in order to change the old habits of the body, for the body to adapt to changes, it takes time and practice. This time is indispensable.
I think just his point about that it shouldn't be like a pain in the ass. It's kind of what
Mm,
he's saying. I think that like you always talk about this, that it should be enjoyable to
right.
practice, right? That this time is indispensable. This is your me time is kind of what he's
Yeah, that's how I take it. Yeah,
yeah,
man. Like
yeah, yeah.
this is the best part of your day, not
Right, right, right.
Of course, poor Tian Ling's in there training day and night with these guys getting beat up by his the older brother and the dad. So
Yeah, well, that's where I think the Yang Cheng Fu kind of had the right idea as far as let's lighten it up a
lighten
little.
it up, yeah. That's the old Yang styles, being
Yeah,
beaten with a opium pipe when you
that's
get
right.
anything wrong in standing. So yeah, that's old Yang. New Yang, we take it a little easier.
I actually think that the that piece about that he was forced to stand first might be a clue as to what the old Yang, new
Mm.
Yang difference.
Standing postures of old Yang.
But
Interesting.
that
Yeah,
could be for another discussion.
for sure. All
All right,
right,
man.
good one.
We'll talk to you soon. Hey, folks, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Just quick reminder, check out the Patreon for the extended episode and bonus episodes. And check out the Instagram for images to go along with the episodes and our Facebook page. All right. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves and be well.